Hey, what's up guys, Joker here, and welcome to the Star Wars Battlefront performance review. Today we're going to be solely focusing on the way the game runs and performs on the PC, talking about the port quality, if you want to call it a port, the settings, the graphics options, all that good stuff, how it runs on the PC. Now, if you're new here, you don't know how I run things, on my main system I have an i7-5820K that's overclocked to 4.6 gigahertz, and that's paired with two GTX 980 Ti's and SLI. In my test rig, I'm running an i5-6600K overclocked to 4.9 gigahertz, and I have two graphics cards that I cycle through that system. One is an AMD card, an R9 380, and the other for NVIDIA is a GTX 970 SSC edition from EVGA. Now, I test both of these systems separately. I test all the different graphics cards at various resolutions: 1920 by 1080, 25/6 by 1440, 4K, and now my first video actually doing ultra-wide. And all the gameplay you're seeing in this video was captured in ultra-wide at 3440 by 1440. So let's go ahead and jump now into the options before we talk about how the game is running on the various setups. We'll start off with controls first. Coming in here in our general, we do have the option to invert flight or our look controls, and we can also set our soldier sprint or zoom mode to toggle or hold. Very nice to see those. We also have separate sensitivity sliders for our soldier sensitivity as well as our vehicle sensitivity. Now, I would like to see an option in here for turret sensitivity as well as different sensitivity sliders for ADS. I mentioned this back in when I was covering the beta as well as the alpha, that they need to have sliders for ADS as well as when you're not aiming down sights. This is very important. I think this is something that should be in pretty much every single shooter, and not trying to compare it to Battlefield 4, but they have this in Battlefield 4 already, so it's kind of a head scratcher that DICE hasn't continued that over into another one of their games, even though it's not a Battlefield title. But this is it's a shooter, and this is something that should be in every shooter, I personally feel. You can let me know how you feel about it down in the comments below, but I think more sliders is always good. We need a turret sensitivity slider, we need ADS and non-ADS sliders. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Before we get into the key bindings, we also do have controller options down here. If you are going to play with a controller on the PC, although it's not something I really advise, you can adjust sensitivity. You can't adjust the individual button layouts, but they do have a few things around here that you can swap around if you want to. Coming into our keyboard bindings, we do have full remappable keyboard bindings for soldier, ground vehicle, and air vehicle controls. So very good. I really don't have any complaints as far as this is concerned in here. You could do multiple bindings if you want to have something on the keyboard as well as the mouse. For example, I have my scoreboard set to tab as well as mouse 3, so if you have mouse 3, mouse 4 buttons, you're going to be able to map things to those as well, so that's nice to see. The star cards you can remap as well, like my thermal detonator, which was normally mapped to 1, I remapped that to G because I'm just used to G being my grenade key, so nice that we do have full remappable key bindings in here. Lefty support, also good. You can remap things to the arrow keys if you want. Numpad, tested all that out. Everything is working fine there as far as remapping the controls are concerned. Coming into our gameplay options, we do have limited options here. We can set it if we want to default to first-person or third-person camera, which is good since you do have both modes in the game. And if you're going to be primarily playing in one or the other, then you can set it to always spawn into that particular mode. We also have a vibration option here for controllers, once again, if you are playing with a controller. And we do have separate toggleable, is that even a word? Toggleable options for our heads-up display, as well as being able to turn up the entire HUD entirely right there with just one option. And one thing that I did see missing from here is the ability to hide chat. Now, again, back to BF4, you can completely hide chat in that game, set it to hidden or whatever. No option in here as far as hiding chat is concerned. So that's kind of disappointing because that's something I like to hide. I don't like looking at the chat. It's usually just full of trolls and people complaining about weapons. So I really don't want to have to see the chat, if I'm being honest. And I wish I could turn that off entirely, but I don't see anything in here by default to be able to do that. Before we get into our video options, we will go into audio here, where we do have options for enhanced stereo, surround, or Dolby. If you are running a Dolby system, you can turn the music on and off, whatever you want to do. And then for the dynamic range, we have stereo, we have speakers, TV, headphones, or a wide dynamic range. If you're running like a 5.1, 7.1 surround setup, you can go ahead and set any of those options. This is nice to see. This is something I look for in every game, and I'm glad that they do have that. You can also set the language that you want for the game, as well as the title of the language. We have Portuguese, English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, Spanish, Russian, English, so quite a few options in there for language, so hopefully you can find something to suit you. I mean, it is fairly limited, I guess you might want to say, for the entire globe is concerned, but there's a good amount of options there, I think. Coming over to video options now, the good stuff. So Starting off, we can adjust our brightness as well as different colorblind profiles. I choose to run on Tritantopia, not because I'm colorblind at all, but because I just like the way the color scheme looks. I think it looks better to me, so that's what I prefer to run. Coming down to the graphics settings here, though, we have, you could set your different monitors. So if you want to toggle between different monitors, you can do that right on the fly in here. This is good to see, good for me, especially if I want to switch over and do testing on my 4K screen. I can instantly just switch to monitor 2, change the resolution, and I'm going to be off and running. Full screen resolution, you can see I am running at 3440 by 1440, and we even have native support for that in the menus, which is nice to see. Back on BF4, it only works in the gameplay. So when you actually go in and you actually spawn into the game, when you're in the menus, all of it is set to be like a 16:9 and you have black bars on the side. This game, that is not the case. The only place I've seen where it was not ultra wide was on the title screen right at the very start of the game. But as soon as you get into the menus and the full game, full ultra wide support, 4K support, 144 hertz, all that stuff is supported in the game. I am running full screen, but you also have options for windowed and borderless windowed. I am running it also at 100 hertz because that's the max refresh rate of this ultra wide monitor, but it does go up to 144 if you're running on a 144 hertz screen. We also have options for VSync on and off, an FOV slider here, which goes from 44 up to 110. That's really low that goes down to. Nice to see that it goes down that low. But for the max, I would have liked to have seen this thing gone to at least 120, but I can't really complain too much. 110 is pretty good, but 120 would be better. I prefer to run at 90 personally. We do have a motion blur slider, which I've turned off as in every game because I just despise motion blur. Resolution scale, we can set up to 200% if you want. If you just want some increased downscaling, get a little bit better texture scaling on the resolution, you can do that if you want. But it is a really big performance impact if you do choose to turn that up. Graphics quality, I have it at custom, and I have everything in here up at ultra. We have our texture quality, texture filtering, which I'm assuming ultra is 16 times. I would like to see the individual numbers there, but it is what it is. Lighting quality, shadow quality, effects quality, post-process quality, mesh quality. We also have our terrain ground cover, anti-aliasing, which we have FXAA high, medium, and low, as well as TAA, which is our temporal anti-aliasing. Surprised to see no MSAA here, or SMAA. We did have MSAA in previous DICE titles and Battlefield games, so surprised to not see that here. We do have ambient occlusion, which goes up to ultra, but again, we don't know exactly what that is, but we can assume it's HBAO, since we've seen that in previous DICE games, but again, we don't know for sure, because it hasn't really put it here in the options menu. Would have liked to have seen some more detail as far as what that ambient occlusion actually is. But let's go ahead and jump into the gameplay now, and we'll talk a bit about how the game is running on the various graphics card setups. Alright, so we got to look at the options there. Let's go ahead and talk about how the game is actually running now on the multiple systems. So my primary chunk of testing was done at 3440 by 1440 on the two 980 Ti's, and I will say that it was running admirably at that resolution. The two cards did not have trouble keeping up with that resolution, but that's an insane resolution, and it's an insane graphics card setup. I know the majority of people, probably like 99.999% of people out there, aren't running that setup, but I do want to comment on it, as I do think it is important to a small select group of people. So at that resolution, I was running around 75 to 80 FPS the majority of the time on the two 980 Ti's. One 980 Ti would not have been enough to handle that resolution, in my opinion, at over 60 FPS constantly. So if you did want to run that resolution maxed out, getting over 60 FPS on a monitor like the Acer Predator X34, then you're probably going to need two 980 Ti's. But I did also test at 1920 by 1080 and 1440 on single GPU solutions. So at 1440, I was able to get a stable frame rate on the GTX 970 as well as a single 980 Ti. Obviously, the two 980 Ti's handled it even better. I was getting like around 140, 150 frames on two 980 Ti's. The SLI was scaling really well. I was seeing around 80 to 90% usage on each card. I would have liked to have seen that scale a little bit further, as I was not seeing any bottleneck as far as temperatures or the CPU is concerned. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit better scaling on the SLI, but I'm not going to complain too much about it because I'm still getting, over up to 150 FPS the majority of the time running at 1440p. So if you're out there running like a 144 Hz 1440p monitor on dual 980 Ti's, then I'm sure you're going to be very happy with the performance you see in this game. But as far as single GPUs, the 970 even was handling it at 1440p, 1080. It was absolutely killing it, getting around 70 to 90 frames on the single 970, sometimes going higher than that, but for the most part, it was around that 70 to 90 FPS area on the single 970 at 1080p. At 1440, for the majority of the time, it was over 60 FPS. There was some dips here and there when action really got intense, but for the most part, I was getting a very smooth experience on that 970 at 1440p. Now, we also tested the R9 380 for the AMD side, so I definitely want to comment on that. It was handling 1080 very, very well. The 4 gigabytes of video memory was helping it out there, because this game does use a decent amount of video memory at 1080p maxed out. It's using just around 3 gigabytes of video memory, so if you're running like a 3 gig card or better, you're probably going to be absolutely fine running this game at 1080p. The 380, was getting around 60 to 70 FPS most of the time at 1080p. Sometimes there were a few dips here and there, but for the most part, the frame rate was quite consistent on the R9 380. I did test 1440p briefly on the 380, but it did seem to be struggling with that. Was not able to hold the constant 60 FPS that I would have liked to have seen. But if you do go ahead and tweak a couple of options here and there, like the anti-aliasing, you should be able to get a smooth experience if you're absolutely adamant about playing at 1440p on an R9 380. As far as the CPUs were concerned, the 5820K, obviously, it's a 6-core Extreme processor. It's going to handle this game in spades. It wasn't really going over about 30% usage. The i5 was definitely getting taxed more. It was running at around 70% usage most of the time on 40-player maps like Hoth and Endor in the Supremacy game mode or Walker Assault. So the i5 was definitely getting hit pretty hard, but it was not getting maxed out. It was not a bottleneck here. So an i5 is definitely going to be more than enough to run this game. And I've said this before back in the beta, and I'll say it again now. If you can run Battlefield 4, chances are you can run Battlefront pretty damn well. It is more taxing than Battlefield 4, but not by much. If you take whatever performance you're getting in Battlefield 4, subtract about maybe 15 to 20 FPS, and that should be what you're going to get in Battlefront. This is kind of a loose guesstimation based on my performance that I've seen and based on what I see in Battlefield 4. So it is a more taxing game than Battlefield 4, but if you can run BF4, you can probably run Battlefront pretty damn well. But that's all I've really got for you guys on the performance. I went over all the numbers I saw here. As far as the port quality, if you want to call it that, is concerned, they've done a really good job. I think they do need to add in things like more advanced sliders in the options menu, but that's just, a couple little things here. Hopefully they get that fixed over time, like they did back with BF4. They, kept, modifying that game over time and making it better and better. The optimization got better. They added more things into the options menu, so I'm hoping they do that here, even though this is a much more, I would say, a casual shooter compared to something like Battlefield. I would still like to see those advanced options in there for players that aren't maybe as casual as others, even though, more casual players probably aren't going to care about that kind of thing. For someone like me that does like to get in there and tweak around and have, as many options as possible to customize my gameplay experience, I want to see those options in there. And for a shooter, even if it's not a, real competitive shooter like CSGO or something like that, I still think that those options should just be in there inherently in pretty much every FPS game that comes out now. Especially, it's 2015, guys. I mean, you guys should know better than this. We should have all those advanced sliders in there. But as far as performance is concerned, the game's running well on a wide variety of hardware, i5s, i7s. So let me know if you guys have been running the game. Let me know what your performance is down in the comments below. I would love to get your feedback and see if it lines up with what I'm telling you guys here today. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, go back to enjoying some more Battlefront, and hopefully give you guys a review or impressions on the overall game as a whole as far as the gameplay is concerned. But I just wanted to focus on performance here today. So going to go ahead and get out of here now, guys. Don't forget to leave me your comments down below. Slap a like on this video and subscribe if you're not already. And I will catch you guys next time. Ta-ra.